Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar, which is all about how to blend self-directed learning with conventional schooling. This is the fourth event in a series of 5, which I'm running with Omnis Education. So welcome back to Jen and Leah. How are you today?
Thank you.
Good, thank you.
Good. I just wondered, because some people might not have seen our previous webinars, can you just give a little introduction to Omnis, what it is and what your roles are there?
Sure, absolutely. Leah, do you want to go first or shall I?
You can today.
Okay. I'm Jen Sutherland. I'm the CEO of Omnis Education. And Omnis is Omnis School is a platform for self-directed learning for people who are homeschooling, people who have their kids in school and who want more of that, for pods, for micro schools. We're building education for everyone, and we are doing it built firmly on a basis of diversity, equity, belonging, and anti-racism.
Fantastic. And how do your roles differ? What bits do you do?
Well, I'm the CEO. She's the COO, so she can tell you what she does. But she does lots of the organization and direction of all of the operational parts of how we make this learning capability happen in the world. And it's my job to talk about education, to connect with lots of other like-minded educators and families elsewhere, and to well, she says that I'm in the pilot boat, and then the ship comes behind building.
Yeah, so Jen's there kind of sailing on ahead of us and telling people that we're coming and what we're doing and what we're about. And I'm the one kind of sailing the ship and also building it and making sure it's being built while we're sailing it. So basically we have quite a strong and clear vision for how we think education should be done. And it isn't how it is currently being done. And as COO, it's my job to make sure that we're kind of building and delivering something that enables us to put that out into the world.
Cool, Brill, thank you. So to start off with, from your perspective, can you tell us what is self-directed education?
Well, self-directed education is exactly what it sounds like. It's education that an individual chooses for themselves. So as opposed to coercive education, which is you will sit down and learn this, self-directed education is learning for the sake of learning because you want to learn something. So there's consent is involved, agency is involved. By nature, self-directed educations are incredibly unique because we're all unique people and unique journeys who want to do different things.
Thank you.
It's like independent learning is how I describe it. It's kind of, as a learner, you get to choose what you want to learn, why you want to learn it, how you learn it, where you learn it, when you learn it.
And what would you say are the benefits to students learning this way? Why would anyone want to incorporate self-directed learning into a more conventional learning environment?
Because the things that we choose to learn, we learn well. We all have this experience with being in a classroom, being, quote, taught a thing, and then we have no memory of it. Did we really learn that in school? I don't know. Did we? Yes, of course, we were taught it. But in order to learn something, consent has to be involved. And self-directed learning ensures that learning is always relevant to young people. And it's a way for them to solve the problems that they have that are relevant to them and answer the questions that they have that they are interested in. And those are really the only 2 reasons anyone ever learns anything, is if they have a problem to solve or a question to answer.
It's consent and choice as well. We choose to learn. It's the difference between being told to learn and choosing to learn something. And in terms of relevancy and why it matters and why should anyone even consider it, well, it's really what we need as adults. And it's certainly what we need as adults these days, where the world of work has changed quite significantly from 30 to 40, 50, 60 odd years ago, when most of the jobs were you're told what to do, you don't have to or shouldn't really be creative, you don't need to think for yourself, your career path was set for life and that was it. And that is absolutely not the case these days. And with the last 2-3 years of the pandemic and remote working, people have to be adults, have to be much more self-directed in their career paths and their own lives. Why wouldn't we want our children to learn how to do that from an earlier age?
Mm-hmm. And children do that from an earlier age. I mean, self-directed learning has become kind of a buzzword in the last few years as people have experimented with that from a more conventional standpoint. But actually, it's just how we learn from the minute we're born. And for some reason, we opt kids out of that for a 12-year span. And then we wonder on the back end why they struggle with doing it again. And, we can talk about that as we get into it, whether or not that's a good idea, how we we harm or how we help our kids in the ways that we teach them to learn. But self-directed education is just actually the way human beings learn. We all do it as adults, and we all do it from the moment we're born.
I think we opt them out because there isn't really an alternative. We have mainstream education, and most of the time that is what we've all done as adults, and it's what we think we need to do because we're not always aware of the choices or that there are choices and there are alternatives to them.
So what about, I mean, we've probably got teachers and school leaders watching this thinking, well, how on earth can we do this with 30 kids in a class? We've got the remits of inspectors and the national curriculums in various countries. How on earth could this be possible in a mainstream environment?
Well, education is not one size fits all within a country even. And there are some very real limitations that schools and administrators and teachers have around what they can and cannot do. And we're not here to say today that, all of that should be thrown out. We should completely reform how we do all of education. That's another conversation that we'd love to have at some point. But the point today is just how do we, knowing self-directed education is how kids learn, it's how adults learn, it's our goal in the educational process. How do we incorporate more of that so that we keep that spark alive with young people, so that we leverage the best of their consent, their engagement, the things that are relevant to them so that they will learn more, better, and faster? And how do we ensure that when they graduate or in the time that they have outside school hours, they can be moving forward in self-directed ways, even while they're in school full-time, even if their school environment isn't very self-directed at all? So there's two parts. There's how teachers can integrate some of these things, and then there's how parents on the other side can continue to nurture that, even if their kids are in schools.
So what are the tips and tricks that you can give to teachers?
Well, we talk a lot about the difference between teaching from a top-down model, which is now children, everyone sit down, we're going to learn a thing, and then a lesson is delivered to kids. And the idea of side-by-side facilitation. It's come on, let's learn together. What questions do you have? And more than anything, the difference between top-down teaching and facilitation is a shift in mindset in the teacher or the adult or the facilitator that's in the room. And it's a way of engaging with young people that respects them as fully autonomous beings as they are, not blank slates that need to be written upon. One that engages them in their consent, their interest, their existing ability, the things they might already know, rather than assuming that those things are all lacking. And sometimes that's the case in schools. We've all had experiences with teachers who delivered to us, but there was very little engagement. And from our perspective, learning is best achieved together in community, where all of the learners in a space, regardless of age, regardless of ability, regardless of learning style, regardless of degree or not, bring something to the table to share, and we learn together and also from one another.
So what could a teacher, for example, do differently tomorrow? What's the first thing they could do to change?
Ask more questions. To me, I was a classroom teacher for a short while, and you're taught to ask questions, but often those questions you ask with a particular end already in mind. You're trying to solicit a particular kind of answer because you want everyone to come to the same conclusion. But in most cases, life is a lot messier than that, right? And one of the things that's unfortunate is there's not a lot of time often in a classroom environment to let it get as messy as it needs to before that organic learning starts and continues and happens. But in the areas that we can as teachers, to ask more questions with less of an outcome agenda, with more actual genuine curiosity, and to allow questions to remain rather than tying up loose ends neatly at the end of a lesson, I think is also important, because that's where maybe their curiosity will take them beyond the classroom to begin to think about something else, and to solicit questions and ideas and ways of thinking about something that might not have come up in the lesson planning book or the lesson planning process or in your experience with a thing. Those are a few ideas.
I think there's also something kind of maybe a little bit deeper and more internal self-searching, which is thinking about the kind of model you want to provide to the children that you teach. And that also works with parenting as well. So, do you want to be the kind of teacher who puts himself at the top? And I know some people do, puts himself at the top, knows everything, but who can actually know everything? Or do you want to be the kind of teacher who models curiosity and open-ended questioning, and it's okay not to know everything. And actually the goal is to learn how to learn, and to learn how to find out the things that you want to know, and not always have to be the person who knows it all, because realistically, who can know it all about any topic?
No.
So what about for parents then, outside of the school day? What can they do to facilitate this kind of approach?
Well, I mean, there are a number of things you can do. You can model learning for your kids. Do your kids see you reading, exploring, wondering aloud, thinking about things that are new to you, grappling with things in questions that you don't have the answers to yet? Do you have a culture of learning in your house? Do you make learning fun? The other thing that often happens, kids often become convinced that learning is this thing we do over here and it's not fun. Well, learning can be fun, and it can be happening all the time and all around us, and pointing out the learning that's happening. Another strategy that has worked really well, in our house with our kids and growing up, and also with other kids that I've engaged with, is just talking to children as if they have brought something to the table and that they might be interested. Often we have two conversations happening in communities. We have one that's happening with adults, and we have one with kids that's often sort of boiled down for them. And what might happen if you started talking to your 3, 4, 5-year-old neighbor as if that person has thoughts about the day and, the garden and the house and the community, and maybe they have an idea about what's happening with the community plan that there was a meeting about last night. Just speaking to kids as if they might have ideas that are worthwhile, I think, is really important. Lea, do you have other things from your experience that you'd like to add to that?
I think probably to add to that, it's learning can happen literally everywhere. So you can be in a car or on a walk, and you can look at things in new ways that you maybe haven't looked at before, like a building or a power station or something. And you can, as a parent, model to your kids, I wonder how electricity works. Well, most of us probably can't actually answer that. So, then it's a case of, well, how can we find out? I'm not really sure. Should we Google that? Should we do this? Should we do that? And it's modeling that kind of lifelong learning, that curiosity, the ability to look at something with kind of new, fresh eyes and go, how does that work? And, that's self-directed learning, because it's a choice to do it. It's doing it everywhere and anywhere. And it's curiosity driven, and it's what's relevant and what maybe is around you and matters to you and your children and your family. And even within the household you can do that. It's there are so many ways that you can do it to keep showing children it's okay not to know, it's okay to keep learning, here's how you can learn. And let's just keep that going. Let's keep those conversations happening.
Another set of ideas, and these could be used in a classroom. They can also be used in a home with your kids. It's doing things together, like building your own personal learning syllabus. Sitting down as a family and saying, hey, what would we like to learn this week, this month, this year? Where are we going to learn that? Who's going to be responsible for digging up this piece or that piece of that? Pursuing knowledge for the sake of knowledge instead of always having it be towards a goal or a grade. You can create your own personal learning records. We talk a lot about keeping learning journals as a family, as a way to sort of track what people are interested in, track what they're learning. And when you're getting stuck and you're wondering, wow, what should we learn next? Sometimes you find patterns in those learning journals that make you think, well, we could, we were really interested in this for a while and we sort of let that go. Maybe we'll go back to that kind of thing. And then actively practicing things together without the goal of necessarily being great at it. It's okay to just do things for the joy of doing them, to practice towards getting better, to fail together and laugh about it, or strategize how you're going to do better next time. Like there are lots of ways that you can build the learning process, which is, there's a 3-step process to learning, into daily life and into your classroom.
Travel is also a great way, and it doesn't have to be overseas. It could be travel and new experiences. So whether that's going to a local restaurant and trying different cuisine, or going to the next big city along that maybe you've never visited, or going to a different country, because learning almost just happens by osmosis. Because in the challenge of having to get to grips with how to do something new, even, grocery shopping in a new city or grocery shopping in a different country, you learn all kinds of things in the process of that. And as a parent, your children also see you kind of having to manage and cope with that. And you know, that's where the modeling comes in. It's kind of, how do you cope with that, and what are you modeling to them, and what are you showing to them? And, you know, what do you do when you get stressed, or what do you do when you don't know? And either you collapse in a heap and find it really difficult and challenging, or you can show them it's okay, this is how we get through this, this is how we learn. But, you know, new experiences, and for my kids, certainly, anytime we take them anywhere new and watch them, like we took them to London a few months ago, and we let them navigate the tube, and they were kind of 8, 9 and 12 at the time, and we just, you know, here's the map, here's kind of how to do it. Jen was with us actually at the time, and, you know,
it was great. And that's real world learning. That's how you do it. And, you know, within a classroom, another thing that comes to mind that is similar to that with real world learning is, you know, in a subway environment, you have a place you want to go, you've got a map, you know, you can see the trains, you can see the signs, you have to figure that out. That's one way to learn it. Another way to learn things is within a classroom. Instead of, you know, when a teacher is preparing a lesson for something, and maybe it is the London subway, or maybe it is, you know, city planning, or maybe it's something entirely different, it's about animals, rather than preparing a lesson that is like, okay, here's what we need to learn to tick all of the boxes, what would happen at the beginning of a particular set of lessons or a series of lessons, you open with, okay, children, this is the thing that we have to learn about. This is what's in the curriculum, because we don't all have choices, right? Sometimes the schools don't have choices. But instead of starting with ticking down the boxes of what you think they should learn, what would happen if you started with an ideation session where you said, what are you interested in? What would you like to know? What do you already know? What would we like to learn together? Where would we find that? Are there subgroups of students who might like to dig into one piece of that or another, rather than everyone having to do it the same way? What would happen if we fractured this group off into 5 or 6 learning groups, and we will all explore the pieces that are interesting to us and then come back and teach one another? You know, there are some really practical, really easy ways to just shift the classroom experience without changing what it is that you, quote, have to teach in order to get there. And, you know, for some people will say, well, that'll take a lot more work. And maybe it does take more intention on the part of the teacher, because you have to pay attention in a different way to what the kids are doing and where their rabbit trails are taking them, instead of, you know, having it all neatly laid out and just ticking through the boxes. But the quality of learning for students is entirely different when they have that ownership and that consent, even within an environment where they, you know, quote, have to be for the day.
Thank you. That's really useful. So do you think this is more about an ethos and like a mindset change, rather than, because there is this proposal, well, Derry Hannon proposes that teachers should set aside like 20% of the curriculum time to be self-directed. And then that's, you know, 20% of the school day or the school week is purely self-directed and very different to the rest of the time. But are you saying it's more of like an ethos shift that runs through like 100%?
Well, I mean, I think it's both, right? You do need to shift your mindset, because you're not going to set aside that 20% unless you do. You won't value it. And 20% would be a great first step. I mean, that's essentially one day a week, you know, taking every Monday or every Friday for self-directed learning entirely. That would change the game for a lot of students. I think that's a great place to start.
It's also the difference between kind of the vision, like, you know, Omnis, we have a very clear vision of how we think kind of learning and education should be done. And we also recognize that that isn't for everybody. And so our goal is often to build bridges of, here's our vision, here's what we're delivering, here's how in an ideal world everybody would use it. And we also know that not everybody is going to use it in that way. So they will find ways to use it that work for them. And that's the same with, you know, it's great for classroom teachers and parents to have an ideal vision of, you know, what they kind of believe the purpose of education is, their educational philosophy, how they would like to teach, the kind of, you know, model of a parent or teacher that they would like to be. And there are also constraints, you know, with the curriculum and the kind of boxes that they have to tick. And it's how you can build bridges towards that vision that still allow you to, you know, bring elements of that vision to life while also ticking the boxes that you need to tick.
Yeah. One of the things we've built in terms of bridge building for both parents and classroom teachers are facilitators guides, because facilitating self-directed learning doesn't always come naturally to people, particularly if you've spent a lot of time in traditional school systems. And so, you know, it feels like a big hill to climb to be like, okay, I have to learn this whole new set of skills so that I can do this thing, because I know it's good for the kids and I want to do it better. And so there are some ways that you can, you know, create cheat sheets essentially that help people think about, what kind of questions should I be asking? What are better questions and less better questions to ask? How do I give some agency to the kids in this experience? And so all of our resources are built they're built for purely self-directed learning if people want to do that and they have that skill set and that's where they're going. But then we also have these bridges built that Lea was referring to that allow a teacher or a parent to take these materials and facilitate self-directed learning for kids, using that without a lot of the prep work and stress that is sometimes involved.
It's, I mean, just to kind of put that into some kind of context, the way it's kind of our version of a curriculum, I guess, is based upon essential questions, which we have 4 essential questions, and they are: who am I? What's the meaning of life? How do we learn and thrive as a species? And what's our responsibility to the planet? And, you know, those are huge questions. And it's kind of, we provide resources and we provide our suggested learning paths, and people can access them in whichever ways they want. And it can also be hugely overwhelming to kind of go, these are huge questions. Okay, they've still provided some guidance and they've still provided some pathways and themes and topics. And how do I use that? And how do I actually take that and use that with my children and put it, you know, create some kind of, I mean, some people want more structure. So how do you take things that are still quite well structured, but put it into even more of a structure to suit the child that I have? Or, you know, you can let them loose and watch what they do. And it's still, this is the vision, and here's how you can use this and build bridges towards whatever works for your specific child.
So do you actually work with schools and help them out with this kind of thing?
Yeah, so we've been working with a couple of different schools, some of them micro schools, and there's one network of charter schools in New York that we've been talking with as well, and our materials are going to be tested in their classrooms in the next month or so. Absolutely, because, you know, we're all learning together, right? Where this is self-directed learning in and of itself, taking baby steps this direction. And so, yeah, we definitely work with teachers and with parents quite closely to make that transition as smooth for them as we can.
That's cool.
There's just a comment that I can see.
Okay.
I'm homeschooling due to school causing trauma, and trying to do anything schooly with my children is a no-no. So I'm a bit stuck, as I don't know how my LAC self-directed learning. The immediate things that come to mind for me are a period of deschooling, which Jen can talk more about, and also when it comes to the local authority, I have homeschooled my children from birth. They've been fully self-directed, and I know different authorities work in different ways, but at the moment all that I need to do is submit an annual report that shows the various different ways in which they're learning, any different classes that they do, kind of different outputs, and most of the time I kind of I think I send in a couple of pages and that's it, and it's normally okay. But the local authorities are different, so you know, they work very differently in the UK. They require different things at different times. If you're a member of any of your local Facebook groups, they often provide really good support as to how to deal with your specific local authority.
Yeah, and you know, Lea, the deschooling is really important. I think, you know, often kids who don't thrive in school, and so their parents pull them out in some capacity or make a shift. There is a school trauma that's been created for some kids, not for everyone. And also there are habits that we formed about how learning happens, right? And so it requires often a period of what we call deschooling, which means from the kid's perspective, it feels like all the fences are lifted. I can do whatever I want. Amazing, which makes some parents nervous, but it's actually a time of intentional watching of the child, intentional studying of the child, figuring out what are they drawn to, what are they interested in, what is their learning style, how do they operate best through a day, what are their best learning hours, because we might not know that if our kids have been away from us for hours a day every day. And so during that period of time, we encourage parents to become students of their kids and to keep really careful learning journals so that they can look for patterns in that. And you know, I don't know the name of this person who's commented because I can't see it, but I would be more than happy to chat with you. We'll drop the link to my calendar in the comments, and you're welcome to book a call with me. I've talked lots and lots of people through this process and can maybe point you towards some resources that might be a good fit for your family. But yeah, if you know that your kid needs to make a shift, and if self-directed education is something that you want to give a try, then there are some resources that can help you forward with that.
Cool, thank you. Can't remember what I was going to ask before that now. You're going to say something, Lea.
I was just going to say that my children haven't ever been in school, so they don't have the school trauma to overcome, but they are also massively resistant because they haven't had the experience of doing anything schooly at all. So even they now attend some of the live classes that we have at Omnis, and getting them to do that to begin with was a struggle because they're just not used to sitting and kind of listening and having to learn, because they've never really had to do it. And the only times they've done it are through choice and things that they're really interested in. And it's still my job as a parent to sometimes say, you need to try this, and, let's give this a go, and sit down and have a go at it. In the course of doing that, they found that some of them they really like. So they have learned to sit and do some of the, probably for them, more schooly things, but they are naturally very resistant to anything schooly, or anything that looks remotely like school or learning.
And the way that our facilitators do those classes, those classing clubs, are very, very different. They're entirely collaborative. They are, child-led, child-centered. The story I've been telling recently is of the math facilitator that we had, who taught coordinate geometry by asking kids, if you were an earthworm, how would you give directions to your house? That was his opener. And from there, it just got wild, so that's when we talk about questions instead of, okay, we're going to teach from the top down. Like, that's a great example of asking questions to facilitate curiosity in kids.
Sorry, just seeing what my next question was. Why do you feel that there's so little self-directed education in the state school systems around the world? What's holding everyone back?
Think about why most of the systems have developed and when they were developed and what the purpose of them was for. It was to prepare people for a world of work and the kinds of careers that look very different from where we are today. So it was, don't question, do as you're told, don't be creative, come and work in the factories or the offices as worker drones and really do what we say. Don't think for yourself. And that's really where we are still today. And it's why we have that top-down model. And actually what kids need now, and what we're seeing from the kind of career options that are available, and not just the options, but the necessity of, you need to navigate your own career path. There isn't, you go into a job and that's it until you retire. You have to be much more proactive about it. That requires a different skill set. It requires not being put into a classroom and into a system which kind of spoon feeds you everything until you're spit out the other end, and then you say, and now what? And the lines that we've been fed are, go and get a degree and you'll secure a job for life, you'll get a really good salary, and and off you go. And that's not the case at all. It doesn't, degrees don't guarantee you jobs. You have to fight with thousands and thousands of other students, and you're also in debt.
Yeah.
And the keys to the kingdom, which we were previously sold as, the degree will get you everything, are now completely irrelevant for some companies and in some career paths. So they don't even look at the education that you've had. They don't look at your qualifications. And, and yet we're putting children through a system and telling them this is what you need.
The other piece of that is, when these school systems were being assembled 200, 250 years ago, they were community hubs. They were the place that you could connect with other people and with certainly other children. They were repositories of knowledge and resources. So when the internet didn't exist, where did you go to get something? You went to the library, you went to school, right, for books. So they were central hubs of educational resources and of knowledge and of community. Well, we've passed into an entirely different era of community and what it means to connect. Now everything you need to know, you just say, hey, Siri. So we don't need to go to a building to access that knowledge. We don't need to go to a building to access the best minds in a particular field. We're no longer limited by our little community area. So, self-directed learning has always been happening. It was controlled out of the school system for a number of reasons, some of which Lea pointed at. Others were just around the organization of knowledge and how to transfer it. But we've evolved past the point of the need for that. So now the question on the backside is, as parents, because the systems change so slowly, as parents and as individual teachers who get it and who want to do something more and different for our kids, how do we access that? How do we make small shifts to give kids more autonomy, to make sure that they have the things that they need to be able to participate in the workforce when they graduate, when they move on into whatever's next for them? And that, the answers to that are not going to be found in the system that isn't working and is now obsolete.
Thank you. And can you give us some examples? Like, have you personally seen a young person change when they're transitioning from this really conventional top-down learning environment to a more self-directed environment, like they've been through that period of deschooling.
My
What
stepkids.
does that look like, thriving versus surviving?
I've got 2 stepkids, and it's really interesting because my 2 kids have been home educated from birth, and my stepkids have been in school. They were flexi school, so they had 1 day a week that they used to spend in forest school. And then the lockdowns hit 2 odd years ago, and we made the decision to home educate them fully and together as the 4 of them. And they spent, as I'm sure most children did, but they spent the majority of the last kind of 2 years lockdown probably deschooling and just getting used to directing their own time and attentions and energy. And it was quite hard to begin with because we saw there was a kind of need for that structure. And one of them, and it is so dependent upon the child. And one of them really thrived and loved the freedom and had been in school for a lot longer. And the other really thrives on structure and wanted the structure and found it very difficult to kind of function without some boundaries and guidelines and structure in place. So there was a period for a while where they emotionally found that very difficult. And over the course of the 2 years, we actually looked at a little school the other day, which is a very, there are some schools who do kind of their own form of self-directed learning. And it was a school of about 55, and they are quite well known, I think, in the UK. They're in Derbyshire for sort of this blended approach to learning. So they do have to follow the curriculum. It's a primary school, but they also have flexi schooling as an option, and they have a provision for home educating families, which is one of the reasons we were there looking. So talking to them was really interesting to hear how they do what they do in terms of the curriculum, and they are very much based. It's quite similar to us. They kind of talked a lot about questions that they use to engage the children with, and they also talked about the loose themes and the loose kind of subjects that they have every day. And they also gave themselves and the children the freedom that if something came up that the children were really interested in, they'd just carry on for the day. And then at some point they had a bat or something that they found in school. So they shifted their entire kind of topic for a week or two to explore bats and that as a topic, which was completely off topic from I think what they were studying at the time. But there are schools and there are environments that do this that are also conventional schools, and I think it's very much about the mindset of clearly the head teacher, but also the teachers, and they recruit very carefully, and it's about finding the balance and kind of being able to build those bridges.
I've worked with hundreds of kids and families who have thrived this way. And just the elephant in the room is children who are in any way neurodiverse. And we've worked with lots and lots of kids. The schools just were not serving their needs well. And when given autonomy, given consent, given an environment where they could work with and leverage the strengths of the very things that were killing them in public school, those kids often are just amazing in terms of what they can accomplish, what they choose to do, what they choose to learn. So yeah, but there are lots of examples of that.
We also have people who work with us at Omnis who are neurodivergent and autistic people who massively benefit from remote working, and the sort of benefits that gives them from not having to go into an office environment, not having to go into these structured environments where they're on show all day, and when children are the same, why not give them the same kind of opportunity in terms of their education? Why force them into environments and situations where it clearly doesn't suit them? They aren't going to thrive because of the way their brains are wired differently, their brains work very differently. It doesn't mean they're any less capable or talented. It just means that the environments are not set up to help them thrive in a way that they are for other learners. So remote learning, online learning, progressive learning, self-directed learning, all of those types of approaches tend to help children whose brains are wired differently and who work differently, and it sets them up for the kind of world of work that maybe is now a much greater option for them than it was previously.
Yeah, brilliant, thank you. So if anyone's inspired, if we've got teachers out there that want to give this a go, do you have resources that they can access now, or do they need to sign up? Do they need to register, or what do they do?
Well, I'll drop my calendar link. Anyone, teachers, parents, you're welcome to book in a half an hour with me and just chat. And we'll, because these paths are so unique, because folks that are taking this path, either as teachers, as parents, feel very much like innovators at this point because we've gotten so far from self-directed education. We're really happy to help you build bridges to your specific situation. I think that's really important when people are starting because it's not one size fits all. Also, yes, we do have some resources that are available. I can happily share those with you when we chat. You can go onto our website and get on our mailing list, which will mean that every single week you get a dose of self-directed learning inspiration into your inbox. What am I missing, Leah?
I think that's it as far as we're concerned, but there are many other, books and resources out there from, from kind of people who have the same ethos and the same mindset. It is about finding options that work for you and building the bridges to, I think the vision is really clear. If you can, that mindset piece is key. If you know what you want for your children in terms of how you want them to learn, and you can see how they best learn. And most of the time as parents, we know that, we have a gut feeling often of whether something is working for our child or not. And it's knowing that there are options and alternatives, that you don't have to stick with the mainstream. There are many alternatives, and it doesn't have to be either or, and it doesn't have to be one end or this end. It can be something in the middle, and it can be, a blended version. And it's about figuring out and kind of advocating for your child to figure out what the right blend and what the right solution is for them.
Yeah, thank you. Any final tips that you want to share, and the thing that we've missed?
I think the biggest thing in self-directed learning for anyone, regardless of your age, whether you consider yourself a facilitator or a learner, whether you're an adult or a child, is remaining curious. To me, that's the biggest thing. If you are curious as a person and you engender curiosity in the people around you, self-directed learning will be happening.
We've also missed the biggest word that we always talk about, which is trust. Because we always talk about trust when it comes to learning, and to trust our children and to trust ourselves. We know how to learn. As human beings, we are hardwired to learn, and we do know how to learn. And it can be sometimes educated out of us at school and the systems. And, we do know what we're doing, and we know how, we learn from birth. We learn how to walk, we learn how to talk, we learn how to crawl, we learn how to eat. We know how to learn, and it's about getting back to that sense of trust in ourselves and in our children, to be able to sometimes just get out of the way and, and let them learn, facilitate them learning.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Well, thank you so much. And we've got our final session in 2 weeks' time. Thank you everyone for watching, and I'll be in touch in the next few days with details of the next session.
Amazing.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.